All right, let's see if it'll be third time lucky with international relations analyst Professor Christopher Isike, who is standing by to bring us some of the analysis there ahead of that meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump and as well as the South African President there, Cyril Ramaphosa, an excited Ramaphosa who arrived in Washington, D.C. a little earlier on as we showed you some of the visuals there. Prof, I hope you can hear us. I just wonder, though, as you're looking at some of these developments and ahead of Wednesday, it's a high-stakes meeting, a lot of, reaction and mixed reaction to what could potentially happen. Some say this might be one of those defining moments to say if South Africa does not assert itself, it could kiss its sovereignty goodbye. Your take?
Well, good evening to you and your viewers, and thank you for having me. Look, I agree that it's a make or my meeting is very pivotal moment in South Africa-US relations. I think that it will not be necessarily that if South Africa doesn't get what it wants, that means it's surrendering its sovereignty. Remember that there are levels of positive relations and engagement between peoples of South Africa and the United States, and even para-national diplomacy between different states in the United States and South Africa. So this is important to reset relations between both countries, and I'm confident that President Ramaphosa will deliver the business on the day.
Does any of that, in your view, from the reading of the situation, matter to Donald Trump?
Well, it matters. That's why he did the inviting. South Africa didn't ask for this meeting, so there must be a reason why he wanted the cautions at this point in time. You see, apart from what South Africa has to offer in terms of critical minerals to US, Trump in particular, South Africa also has a political capital that is very useful for America at this point, especially now that it is alienating its, traditional allies in Europe and elsewhere in the world.
And Prof, for you, when you read this particular situation, right, a lot of people speak about the white Afrikaners who landed in the US, of course, recently. And yes, that's important. The presidency speaks about the fact that they will seek to, make a firm stance on that, iron out whatever issues there. But this is also a meeting about trade. This is, quite going to be important in that. And yes, President Ramaphosa is in the spotlight, but how much of the spotlight as well is also on the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Pakistan?
You mean the Roland Lamola is Minister for...
Oh, pardon me. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, I meant to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is more for South Africa a trade meeting, discussions than these sundry issues of refugee admissions that was given to a status that was given to white South African Afrikaners. Of course, that can become an issue, but it's not top on the list of South Africa's concerns at the moment. President Trump can mouth all kinds of misinformation and disinformation as long as he wants, and as we saw, from his election, the 2020 elections, which he refused to concede till date. He tells a lie, he believes it and hopes that others will believe in it, and maybe at some point he even believes his own lie. So I don't think it's useful for South Africa to put that at the top of his list, except of course it's a strategy by the United States to begin to represent South Africa as a country where genocide is taking place in order to discredit its moral local standing to prosecute the ICJ case against Israel. If that is the strategic purpose, then of course it will be something to think about, but not something to put at the forefront in this particular engagement between both countries, we should be focused on really on what South Africa can offer the United States economically and politically, and there is a lot there.
And especially because when you think about the fact that this is not a South Africa that's on the back foot going into this meeting, especially when you listen to, an official, Clayson Munyela from the Department of International Relations earlier on, he speaks about the fact that as South Africa, there are 12 minerals that the U.S. has said it has set its sights on, and South Africa does have this. So whatever you put at the table, this is not a South Africa that is at a disadvantage.
Absolutely, that's the point I'm making. It is able to, put itself on the agenda a bit more than many people think. For example, this visit is not a state visit. It's a working visit, and there are certain elements of formality that do not necessarily apply in this case. And so a working visit has very minimal ceremonial activities, and countries that are being invited can actually insist on not having press meetings where they are embarrassed, like we saw in the case of President Zelensky. So and all of this is coming on the back of South Africa's leverage and agency in this particular discussion. So it's not a completely a David and Goliath meeting, even though on paper that's what it is when you look at the enormous power that the United States holds globally.
And right on that point, because this is a President Trump who had a phone call conversation with President Ramaphosa just shortly after, that meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky. And he's been someone, that is President Trump, that has been wanting to be seen as a peacemaker, even speaking about this at his inauguration. So certainly when you look at the fact that right now his positioning is of a man who wants to be peacemaker, and how much of this, I wonder, in your view, when it comes to the development in Ukraine, does come up in this particular meeting?
Well, you can only but commend the position that South Africa has taken in this particular conflict. Initially, of course, the U.S. was at umbrage with South Africa because of its neutrality and tacit support for Russia in many ways. And then since then, South Africa reset and saw itself as a peacemaker between two brothers that South Africa is related to, both the Ukraine and Russia. And the role that President Ramaphosa and leading other African leaders to try and intervene in this war is nothing but commendable. And one thing that plays to Ramaphosa's advantage is the fact that President Trump is a big admirer of President Putin. So anybody who's Putin's friends can potentially be a friend of Trump as well. So he's not going to, be at President Ramaphosa's throat for any Russian activities, even though Republicans and Democrats in the House think otherwise.
Prof, briefly before I let you go, how much of that, I know you speak about President Putin, right, but at the end there, the journalist speaking about handicaps and golf, do you think our golf courses are enough to persuade President Trump to come to the G20 meeting?
Absolutely, and I'm sure that he would come to that meeting. He's very erratic and transactional, like we know. If you gave him effusive praise enough and laced with some benefits for him, he would come. South Africa is a beautiful country. He knows his head about it. He sure wants to come to South Africa, and I'm sure he will.
All right, Prof, thank you so much for taking our call at such short notice. Appreciate your time. Thank you so much. That was International Relations Day analyst, Professor Christopher Isike, speaking about the developments in the U.S. We saw President Cyril Ramaphosa landing there a little earlier on. He's at that hotel, and we do, according to Show and Understand, that Minister Pakstow there, as well as John Steenhuisen, expected to arrive a little later on, is the International Cooperation Minister, Ronald Lamola, as well as the Minister and the President, So we'll continue then to keep our finger on the pulse in this particular story and bring you all the developments.